Hello, I'm Liz, one of Derry's reference librarians, and welcome to another episode of Misinformation Busters. Once a week, we tackle a rumor or false, misunderstood information and try to separate fact from fiction. This week, we're going back in time for a history lesson and talking about a moral panic from the 80s, the Satanic Panic specifically. This is going to be a long episode, so let's get started. So, what's the story? The Satanic Panic is remembered as a time where suburban parents started to get really concerned that their kids were into Satan. It was influenced by a lot of factors: the emergence of metal bands using occult symbols, the devil becoming a subject for popular films like The Exorcist, The Omen, and Rosemary's Baby, Anton LaVey's Church of Satan starting up, and the general changing of social mores of the 70s. We also saw fantasy and games like Dungeons and Dragons gain mainstream popularity, and some parents, unfamiliar with the content, panicked. And this was weaponized by the religious right. The 1972 book, The Satan Seller, had already gained popularity with the growing evangelical sect, and there was already paranoia about satanic influence. So parents started to see warnings about the dangers of metal and satanic games, best exemplified with the Jack Chick comic saying Dungeons and Dragons was a one-way ticket to suicide and Satan. The 1980s also saw the publication of a book called Michelle Remembers, a book purporting to be a memoir of a woman who survived satanic ritual abuse. Remember that phrase. So the concern wasn't just that kids could be influenced by games. The concern was that they could be targeted by evil satanic cults. So, what are, or were, the facts? Well, as I kind of hinted at before, the Satanic Panic is usually remembered as a joke, as a moment of mass hysteria. And in retrospect, it is funny that people genuinely believed there were roving gangs of devil worshippers eating kids, and that Dungeons and Dragons, a game known for being just quaint fun now, was considered dangerous. The symbolism on albums was for shock value. Michelle Remembers was proven to be a fraud. The FBI actually looked into claims of satanic crimes, and a report on the panic said, quote, "The information presented is a mixture of fact, theory, opinion, fantasy, and paranoia, and because some of it can be proven or corroborated, symbolism on rock albums, graffiti on walls, desecration of cemeteries, vandalism, etc., the implication is that all of it is true and documented," and then proceeded to say that the panic was made worse by sensationalism in the media, and that much of the evidence was material produced by those looking to push an agenda. But in reality, it wasn't just parents panicking. Before the author was exposed as a fraud, Michelle Remembers was touted by fact on the talk show circuit. Geraldo Rivera ran a special on satanic activity. Oprah gave a platform to supposed victims of satanic ritual abuse. Police and churches had warnings about satanic gangs. People took these claims at face value without any investigation, and before long, accusations started to fly. This also coincided with another, more grounded in reality panic, the stranger danger panic. The abduction and murders of Adam Walsh and Eaton Patz had gained national attention, and there was just a general growing awareness of child abuse by family members and other people that they know. So there was a very legitimate fear for the safety of children. And I should note that there were accusations that turned out to be real, and people rightfully went to jail. But when this concern for children intersected with the fear of satanic ritual abuse, it became something harmful and honestly unhelpful. The most famous accusation is the Mcmartin Preschool case. In 1983, parent Judy Johnson called the police and said that her son had been abused by Mcmartin teacher Ray Buckley and her estranged husband. She also made more odd claims, like that Ray could fly. The police began an investigation, as they should, but it became a media circus. Children were interviewed, and some of the claims were downright bizarre and resembled the publicized claims of satanic ritual abuse. There were even allegations that there were secret tunnels underneath the preschool, which there were not, because investigators actually looked for them. Honestly, this case is so big and went on for so long, I am going to recommend the book We Believe the Children for a more complete look at it. But to wrap it up, at the end of the day, after 2 trials, the owner of the preschool was cleared after there was no real evidence, and many of the people questioned the interviewing of the kids, including the fact that some of them may have been coached by parents or led on. Judy Johnson herself was diagnosed as schizophrenic and died in 1986, and the charges against Buckley were dismissed. But others weren't so lucky. Fran and Dan Keller, who ran a daycare center in Texas, were accused of abusing a child in a satanic fashion, and despite no real evidence, spent over 21 years in jail. It wasn't until Jordan Smith, an Austin reporter, looked into the story and published a piece on the lack of evidence that their case was revisited and they were freed. Turns out the child's therapist had bought into the satanic ritual abuse panic and, in a session, steered the child towards accusations of satanic abuse. And the West Memphis Three, a very high-profile case of 3 young men who were wrongfully accused of murder, actually began with a satanic panic. The young men were considered suspects because they listened to metal and dressed weirdly. And by the time they were freed, the people who many think actually killed the young men had already died, meaning the chance for justice was gone. It's comforting to think of moral panics and witch hunts and conspiracies that manifest into real harm as something of a bygone era. But we need to remember this and the harm that happens when one person's paranoia or grift goes unchecked and becomes real. And the danger of platforming this stuff. It's similar to pseudoscience that gets platformed by people like Oprah, and it becomes legitimate. The panic is also good to remember because it's a good lesson that conspiracies don't go away, they just morph. Satanic ritual abuse actually has roots in blood libel, which is a conspiracy or old rumor in which Jewish citizens of Europe were accused of murdering and consuming Christian children. And currently, the Pizzagate conspiracy has a lot of shades of the satanic ritual abuse panic/accusations. So it's good to keep your critical thinking cap on, be it in the 1600s, the 80s, or today. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, look for the sources in the comments. If you want to do some research, you can use our EBSCO databases, which are available through the library's website. See you next week!